That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of hashtag TV Guideposts, where we're going to be visiting with some new friends in Hawkins and all the Stranger Things that take place there, covering episodes 5 and 6 with some of our dear friends. So thank you again for stopping by for this week's hashtag TV Guideposts. Welcome to it.
TV Guideposts.
Very nice, very nice. I see. So, okay, so I'm actually quite unfamiliar with this. If you don't mind, we've been inaugurating these segments when we bring them up, just with getting some feedback on your general thoughts about the show. Steve, I'm going to be coming to you first. I don't know your general feelings about the show Stranger Things season 3, or whatever. So, just what's your history with the show? Love it, hate it? Just checking it out. What are your thoughts?
I don't know if I would say I love it. I very much like it, though. I watched it since the first season, and maybe a few weeks after it came out, after the hype was going strong.
Sure.
I still think season 1 is my favorite, and I didn't quite like season 2 as much, but I thought I liked season 3 the worst. But then after I rewatched a few episodes, like, oh, maybe I misjudged it. Maybe it's a little better than I thought.
Cool.
Yeah, but there's still certain elements of season 3 I don't think are as good, but I think the character development is really one of the stronger points.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that.
I think, as I said before, I'm really a fan of stuff like Lost and how that was very big in character development. And so I think this is similar to that in that way.
Awesome. Matt, I'm gonna come to you next. What's your footprint with Stranger Things? How you feel about it?
I have to say it's not my jam.
Okay.
Which is kind of a surprise because I'm definitely in the target demo for this thing. I'm 55 years old, so my childhood and adolescence sort of straddles the late 70s, early 80s, and
Sure.
the pop culture references, I get them. The songs, it's like, oh, it's this is the soundtrack of my childhood, And I think if I had seen if something like Stranger Things had been on the air in the 80s, I would have loved it to death and I would still think fondly of it. But the problem is that my tastes have changed. And I don't know. It's like, yeah. And the thing I was thinking about how to put this, like when the show first hit big in season 1, Victor LaValle, the author of Ballad of Black Tom, made this interesting comment contrasting with another Netflix show that debuted right then, which was Baz Luhrmann's The Get Down.
Oh, yeah.
Which is another very different kind of nostalgia fest, but it's like late 70s, late disco era, but that's also part of my childhood. But it's about scrappy black and brown kids up in the Bronx, basically helping to invent hip hop. And for me, because I grew up in New York City, there's still a definite era of nostalgia where I'm recognizing the cultural lamppost, but it's at the same time, it's a part of the history that was going on in my childhood that I wasn't aware of at the time. So, and what Victor basically was saying is like Stranger Things, you're showing you things you've seen a million times before, whereas the Get Down is showing things you've never seen before, in part because what the Get Down is about, it wouldn't have been on television in the 80s. So, and I think that's why it really resonated for me. And not just for me, my wife was like, I remember we were watching it and she's like, if you told me I would be this wound up and excited about a show that's about hip hop, I would not have believed you, but I love this.
Sure.
And so,
right.
So yeah, with Stranger Things, I'm just like, it's not, I'm not saying by any means that it's bad. It's just, it's not to my taste. That being said, one of the things that was interesting watching, like I watched from the beginning of season 3, I read spoilers for the first 2 seasons to remind myself what it was about.
Yeah.
And watching that in tandem with then Killer Klowns from Outer Space, which I did watch when it came out and which I still have very fond memories of, even though it's in many ways not a very good film.
Right.
But that contrast basically taught me something, made me realize something that I hadn't before the first time I tried to watch Stranger Things, which is that it may be doing things I've seen a million times before, but it is doing them in a really smart, witty way. And in many cases, it's a better done version of the things it's imitating or that it's referencing.
Yeah.
And I think the moment that kind of really brought this home to me was episode 4, where the kids are breaking into the secret Russian base, and you've got Erica, the sassy precocious black girl, and I'm like, oh, sassy precocious black girl, I have seen you so many times before. I know exactly what you are and are not capable of. You're not going to surprise me in any way. And that's pretty much true. But there's this point where she's climbing into the vent and she's going, commencing Operation Child Endangerment. I just started laughing, and I'm like, okay, that's a good line, and that's a better line than the the Mark 1.0 version of sassy black girl would probably have been said. And I think that's why this show is so popular, is because if you want the kind of thing that it is, it will deliver you the best version of it.
Yeah,
it just doesn't happen to be for me, but props to that.
No, I can appreciate that. I think that's a really astute observation, actually. And Blake, so what is your footprint with Stranger Things, just writ large?
So I don't think it was the day of the release of the first season, but it was like the weekend after it released. That it was before the hype really kind of hit, like at the height of that first season being as big as it was. I remember I pretty much binged it over day and a half maybe, and loved it. Loved the first season. Hit all the nostalgic points for me. I caught most of the references, even though I'm not the best at catching references, just because I'm not really paying attention to references. I'm paying attention to the narrative. But I really, really loved the first season. I really, really despised the second season. And so whenever y'all had your classic going at it on the podcast, I think that was the moment where I was like, I might like this Nathan guy.
He won you over.
Yeah. And then 3 was a mixed bag. It's kind of like Beckley said. I really wanted to like it, and there were parts of it that I felt worked better than the second season, but on the whole, like I feel like my general enjoyment of the show has kind of lessened as each season has gone, and so I'm curious to see, like, if I'm hoping 4 kind of raises it a little bit for me, but the watching
sounds like it will, for sure.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, I feel like watching the episode 5 and 6 for the show, it kind of made me appreciate aspects of it that I may not have appreciated before, and I really came to the conclusion that Stranger Things is really just about the redemption of Steve Harrington. And that's all that matters. And
well,
you know what?
If that's the situation, then it succeeds with flying colors.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Honest to God, like Steve, and deservedly so. Steve gets so much love. I mean, like he's a great character. Mm-hmm. And I think we'd mentioned, I think it was last week, we talked that like Steve and Hopper just kind of come fully formed out, and they're interesting characters regardless of the show they're in, that they're kind of strong. So does anybody have?
If I can jump in there,
yeah.
I
please.
don't think Steve comes fully formed. I think Joe Keery comes fully formed, and the producers find Steve because of Joe Keery.
That's fair.
Because I think that first season, it's not so much that he's unlikable, which he is. It's they've typed him as the unlikable kind of 80s bully character, and I think that likability of the actor starts to shine through, and they just lean into the skid. So
he was even somewhat redeemed at the very end of that season.
Sure.
Yes.
He kind of became the protector.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's kind of the beauty of his character, is he can't help but protect those kids, so, even though he doesn't want to.
It's true. No, it's quite true.
Could I say one more thing?
Yeah, please, by all means.
Something about the seasons as they progress. They don't make these seasons from one year to the next. I think they have a year or two between each one. So the actors and the characters are getting a bit older in between each season. So now we don't have children and teenager characters. We have teenager and then the older ones in their mid-20s now. I think that's part of the reason it sort of loses its allure for me. I like it being sort of about kids in the 80s and not older teenagers and young adults in the 80s, because I was in my child years in the 80s myself too.
Yeah. No, I can totally relate to that. So episode we're talking in specifics about episode 5 and 6. So we'll start with episode 5. I'll kind of kick the door down, and then we'll just sort of round robin anybody that's got anything to say particular to this episode or particular to this pair of episodes. I will say, love me some Stranger Things homages and little touch points. If there's anything that I feel like goes probably a bit too far in the homage to where it's a little silly, is how much that Russian villain is like the Terminator. Like how much he looks, how much like
Carrie Ellis, the mayor, even references him as Arnold Schwarzenegger, doesn't he? Yeah,
yes,
I was like,
he does.
Okay, we have pushed through the singularity into MetaZone, you know.
Yeah, it's and I mean I kind of like what they do around that plot line in general, but even like it got to the point, as much kind of unbridled affection as I have for this show, it got to the point even watching it where I'm like, come on. Like it's got the same hair.
It reminds me a little of when you first watched The Force Awakens in the theater, and you're like, look at them winking at A New Hope, and then by the end of it, you're like, oh, it's A New Hope.
Yeah. It just took the script and changed the dialogue. Like that's all they really did.
Winking at the Terminator, and then it's the Terminator.
Yeah, like that
really
scene
is.
where he's firing the gun at them. Whether it's absolutely that.
I actually feel like the way that they could have actually salvaged that character, or that kind of that hat tip, is to have put someone who was big for the 80s action films, but not well known. Like I kept in my head, I was like, why couldn't they get Dolph Lundgren? Because he's doing stuff. Like he got him. They got him for Creed too. So like. He would have been perfect, and he would have been the perfect kind of meta, like
stunt casting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
No, that actually, I like that idea a lot.
I think they were actually trying to cast actual Russians as the Russians, because
that's fair.
I looked into it, and it looks like they did.
Yeah.
So that he's an actual Russian.
Yeah,
it's good. It's not just a good accent. Okay.
Wow.
I do love. I mean, I even call him Arnold in my notes. Like that's how direct it is.
Yeah, of course.
But just a random note about episode 5 that I wrote down is I love that the show knows that Hopper is physically outmatched by him, and doesn't give him the easy physical wins, because you know we love Hopper. We don't want to see him get his ass kicked, but he should by that guy.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
I actually like that that's kind of the case, and they have to be a bit more reliant on wits than, you know, brawn.
No, that's Hopper.
Yeah. He never bests in this pair of fights that they've had so far, and to be honest, I haven't rewatched the end of it, so I can't remember how they conclude with it, but he never bests him physically, to your point, Nathan. Like in these fights, he straight up loses the first time, gets knocked cold for like a day and a half, and then the second time gets away almost by a sequence of good luck that he's able to sort of maneuver away from the fight. But yeah, I do agree with that. I think it's savvy.
But that does lead to a really great David Harbour moment when his I'm not going to yell it the way he does in the back seat when he says the word drive, and it's really drawn out, and I mean, it's just hard not to love David Harbour in this show.
Yeah.
He's my favorite character, I think.
Yeah, he's so likable, and there's so much of his emotion that I agree with. Like I love the stuff. I actually think this is more in 6. But I love all the stuff with him and Joyce and the Russian Alexei. Like, like that whole sequence of things is so great. And a lot of it is driven by, you get the tension between he and Joyce, because they've got their romance, you know, in play, or that, you know, their potential, he likes her, but, you know, she's not reciprocating because she's still pining for Bob. But so there's all of that at play, and then just his perpetually rising frustration at Alexei and not being able to speak Russian and all these other things. Like he's really, really great at all of that. And then there's some great payoffs in 6 that we'll get to in a second. I had one note here before we get to, you know, other deeper things, and I'll just invite everybody to chime in if you have something else about this episode. I love that Steve wins his first fight. Dustin even calls it out. Yeah, he's like, you want to fight, man? Like, it's so great. Like, I love that piece of it. Does anybody, before we get to the final sequence in the hospital, does anybody else have anything about the episode prior to that? Because I want to spend a moment on that.
I think that was the most memorable part, is the hospital bed.
Yeah, I think it might be It's definitely the creepiest thing that this season gives us. It might be one of the creepiest things that the show gives us. That whole sequence where
great.
Nancy and Jonathan are trying to evade the flayed infected people.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, sorry to cut you off there, but the echo your energy there of like, it's true horror energy in that sequence. And
absolutely.
And Reed, you mentioned not having rewatched the end yet, and I won't spoil what the content is, but I think this season is paced really well. It has some really strong set pieces peppered throughout. The sauna test, which we talked about last week, the hospital attack, which happens in these two. There's a forthcoming cabin attack, and then kind of the finale. Like they're paced really well. They're well choreographed. They don't just repeat a conflict kind of scenario, because that's what's hard with stuff like this. You always, and to me, if I give season 2 any props, it's that they at least tried to not do the same thing. Now,
Sure.
I don't think it really worked, but I do think it's hard with this kind of storytelling to not, okay, well, here's your bad guy, and we're going to build to the bad guy, and your fellowship is fractured along the way, and they come back together in order to defeat them. Like those are, and even still that's present in this season, but the way they structure it, I think, is really smart.
I agree with you about the pacing in the middle of the season. I felt like the first episode or two were a bit slow to get going, too much character, not enough what is this actually going to be about. But
sure.
I wasn't sure whether that was because I just hadn't watched the first 2 seasons, and I felt like maybe if I knew these characters better, I wouldn't mind this as much. But as it is, I'm just like, okay, when are we going to get to what the point of that was?
Well, and to your point there, Matt, I'm less speaking to pace from a rhythm standpoint. I'm speaking from when they use the set pieces and what those set pieces are from an action standpoint. Like, for instance, the sauna test, it's a really impactful sequence that you would sort of expect to be later in the season. That's all I mean. It's just when they use these big set pieces, they're well done, I think.
One reason that I didn't love this season, first time I watched it, was that they just brought so many characters together. You would have these scenes like when all the kids were brought together, like the older kids and the younger kids, and they basically became like a big detective team. They went over to the house where the people had been killed by, Heather and the newspaper guy. Yeah, and they were trying to put all the pieces together. And there were some kids that were talking, other kids that were just standing there, really doing nothing. It just seemed like too many people in one place.
Yeah.
And that's when they went outside and they were going to go to the next place, and they got in the big station wagon, and Mike and Will went into the Wayback, and then Will was like, "Welcome to my world." I didn't really know what he meant there, but he's like the one of the kids in a family of 4. Like, don't you get a real seat usually?
No, I totally get it. And it's funny because we mentioned last week how that's one of the things that the show intentionally does is separates everybody into these little pockets, like side quest kind of things, and then works really hard, especially where we are in the season talking about these episodes, to try to start colliding different efforts together, like bringing together what Lucas and Mike and Will were experiencing with what Nancy and Jonathan were investigating and everything. And I think one of the things that I don't know what this says about the show, that I had forgotten this element, but when at the end of episode 5, what we keep talking about with this hospital attack, when it culminates in the actual real world rendition of the Mind Flayer, I was like, this is a fantastic creature. Like, it's just, it's really intimidating. It's nebulous in its form, and it's also, that's part of its ability, is that it can meld down into almost like the Blob and move in and out of places, but then it can be something of a shaped solid thing. So I think it's just a really intimidating and great kind of monster. Anybody else have anything on 5 before? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and especially about the monster, whom I called Glorpy, Glorpy. Glorpy, because that's kind of the sound he makes, or it makes, or whatever. It is what's, you think too hard about this, it's pretty nauseating. It is the aggregate collection of bones and tissue and guts. I mean, that's pretty jacked up as far as what's arguably a TV 14 kind of enterprise here.
Yeah,
that's disgusting.
Of course. No, absolutely. And we see, but this gets into the end of 6, but we see that that is taken to its somewhat horrific extreme in terms of it's one thing if it was all made up of just disposable rats, you know, but now we're starting to get into actually oh my God, no, this is the ultimate fate of all these people that it's been sort of infecting. So so moving into 6.
So one more thing.
Go ahead, Blake. Yeah.
So there's,
you know how this works, Blake.
Oh yeah. If you put Jacob Busey in a show or a movie, sign me up because I am there.
He's the worst.
And he plays that villain role so well.
Oh, absolutely. The poor guy might be nice as could be in real life, but he has just got the persona.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Nathan, have you ever seen The Frighteners? That's the other big thing that I know Jake from.
I have seen it. I keep waiting to revisit it until for whatever reason we cover on the show. So
and there's also the killer in Identity.
That's right.
Oh, that's right.
Or
yes.
is he?
The killer.
One of them. Oh, yeah. That's right. So I really love season 5 ends on that big cliffhanger, the reveal of the mind flayer and everything, and then the early parts of the episode, it picks back up with that. One thing that I will say, I have very few criticisms of it because my energy around it is very affectionate. But one of the few things that I felt in episode 6, when Nancy, by all intents and purposes, should have been a goner. There's no reason whatsoever why she survives that moment, except that it toys with her long enough for Elle to arrive. And then Elle sort of takes care of business with it. And I remember actively thinking here, so this is a critique that will turn into a positive because I think the show hangs a lantern on it, is that I remember thinking in the moment, it's like, wow, they're just relying on Elle to solve all their problems. Elle shows up and Elle can take care of business. And then towards the last third of it, Mike is the one who actually says it out. Like, everybody is careless with her powers. You just expect her to do everything. And, she's going to get exhausted. She's going to get hurt. She's going to get in trouble. And so I appreciated that either the show was self-aware enough to realize that's what it was doing, or maybe it was just some good fortune with that particular character based on Mike and Elle's relationship, that pretty much the moment in the show where I thought, okay, does Elle have to do every single bit of the saving in this show, that Mike finally calls out? Yes, the answer is yes. That Mike finally calls out, you're just being willy-nilly with her powers. You're toying around, getting her to spy on us, just like for your own interests. You're asking her to, spy on this person, locate that person, and all of the things that it begins to recognize with her. She's not a machine, and that I just really appreciated that they recognize that out. What else do people have commentary of any sort on episode 6?
I think it's at the end of episode 6 where we have another person that saves the day, right? And Dustin comes in and cattle prods the doctor.
That's great. That is a great moment. That is a really great moment. Yeah, Matt, what you thinking?
I was just the little torture sequence where they're beating the crap. I keep forgetting his name, but the guy who's getting it just reminded me. My dad, who was a chaplain at a hospital, would always talk about how real head trauma is not like that.
You don't just shake it off.
You don't just shake it off. And so, I'm watching them beat him up, and that was just but then there was the later moment when he and Robin are tied together in, back to back, and they bring in the truth serum. And I just had to look it up. That to me was sort of almost like a True Lies reference, but of course that's 90s, not 80s. But and of course, they're going to give him the truth serum, but he's going to keep telling the same story. And that was also the moment, though, listening to Robin, when I'm like, why am I getting this deja vu listening to this actress? And I looked her up and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke's daughter. And I'm old. So,
I remember I didn't look that up until after the season was over. After I'd watched it, I was like, "Oh yeah."
So that was probably that was my "that ain't right" moment for Stranger Things.
Because your mind melted like an infected rat.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
let's
Yeah,
see.
go ahead, Nathan.
Episode 6. I mean, I this is fresh on my brain because I rewatched the last kind of 20 minutes of episode 6, but there's a look. I think it's when the alarm goes off in the bunker, right? In the Russian bunker, that Joe Keery just gives to the torture guy. And it's just so good. I mean, like there are, as a person who occasionally and still on a certain level aspires to be an actor, every now and then you're like, that person, they're not really good. You know, all my creative heads know what we're talking about in terms of this thing that happens. But every now and then you see someone do it and you're like, that's good. I really like what he just did. You know, like line? I am not going to take anything away from that performer there.
Do you have that line in front of you? Do you know what it is?
I don't remember it being a line. I remember it being just a look he made.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I have a line that he said that I really liked.
Yeah. What was it?
It was when he was like taunting the not the doctor, but the guy, the Russian commander. And he was talking about Dustin going back to Hopper and that they're going to come in there with the cavalry. He said they're going to come in here commando style, guns ablazing, and kick your sorry asses back to Russia. You're going to be 2 pieces of toast.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, which is a really odd line, but he delivers it really well.
Yeah.
I do, you know, Matt, you were picking apart head trauma. You know, it's just a fun show, Matt. Come on.
No.
I know. I'm playing with you because I'm about to do the exact same thing. But at the end of episode 6, when the Glort monster is Avengers assembling the entire town of Hawkins, I'm like, are we gonna deal in season 4 with the fallout that like half of Hawkins has been symbiote Venom styled into this monster? Like
the long answer to that is no.
Right. But as these people were queuing up for their time to get absorbed, I was like, what's left to attack?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
They don't come back, do they? They're not going to get like Thanos snapped and returned.
Oh no, they're gone. They are fodder to the wind. Like
but
they're
real
just
estate
like,
prices will fall and more people will move in.
No, it's true. It's true. Like, yeah, sure.
Because you know they're going to hear the stories from Hawkins.
Oh my
gosh!
Giant
magnet under it. You know,
depends on how much white flight's going on.
Yeah. Listen, in this market, sign me up for Hawkins. Okay, like, is there real estate available in this market? Like,
it's like
please.
Woodsboro and Scream. It's like
stores downtown, right?
Oh man, but I think so. You were talking about like a look or a moment or whatever about Steve. Another moment that I really love, that just really made my heart soar was when Dustin convinces Erica she's a nerd. That made me so delighted because her reactions, that child actor is just, she is so in it. Like when he's like, you know everything about politics, and he's like, just because I don't agree with communism as an ideology, I'm like, oh man, she sells it to the nines. It is a completely lived in moment with both of those actors, and I think it's pure delight. It makes my heart soar every single time. I have one more thing to note about the episode, but does anybody else have anything else that they want to call out?
I have. Yeah. Oh, good.
No, you go ahead, Matt. Yeah.
Mine would be the moment when David Barber is basically predicting that so and so is not going to drive away, and they convince me that no, he is, and then they come outside and the guy's waiting, and David Barber just gets this look in his face. And one of the things I really like about the way they handle the characters, I actually initially did not, I like him because I like the actor, but
sure.
He's an idiot so much of the time in the way he behaves, particularly when he's, trying to convince the kid not to spend too much time with Elle. So he's very much a stock type that you would see in 80s movies, but they do it in a way that is not, I guess the best way I can say is he's not, there's never hateful. He's acts in a way that a normal human being would never act on certain occasions, but it never goes to the point where I loathe him. It's more like, okay, you're just you're chewing the scenery maybe a little here, but then there are moments like that when I'm like, okay, this is really cool. Yeah. He's actually smarter than he lets on, and sometimes he has a moment.
I think the character is very smart. It's just that he has a temper, and
I know, but it doesn't feel like a realistic
yeah.
temper. It feels like an 80s sitcom temper.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
But to your point on that scene, Matt, what I love so much is that glint when he starts to doubt himself of, of what he's committed to.
Yeah.
But then it pays off. It's such a great moment of triumph.
I love the exchange of what set it off, though. The whole yet they have to bring Alexei what he wants first. His snack food items. And I brought my prop there, the Slurpee.
Nice, nice.
I was even unable to get a cherry Slurpee too. I showed up and Cherry was there.
So you're not going to be very forthcoming on this conversation, is what you're saying.
Cherry was there. It was just defrosting. I asked, "How long is it going to take?" They said, "Oh, probably an hour."
Like what? What kind of rickety establishment are you running here? You don't have cherry Slurpee ready for me. I do. I absolutely love the payoff that they give to that, because they had me doubting it. Like they had me thinking like, no, Hopper's an idiot, and we're just absolutely gonna completely drive away with it.
Well, I think that goes to the stereotype of that character, though, is that you're supposed to know that he's an idiot and that this is not going to work out the way he plans, just like every other 80s and 90s sitcom or movie or anything like that. And then they actually give it to him, and you're like, that's smart. That's actually really smart.
Yeah. And very satisfying, all the more satisfying as a result of it. For my money, this pivots from the very satisfying into just the thrill zone. They set the stage. It doesn't fully pay off in this episode, but they set the stage for what they're going to try to do to sort of eventually redeem the character of Billy, in terms of like just showing us through Elle the flashes that of the hardships of his life. But this episode, I mean, I praise episode 5 for like giving us the mind flayer scream and then like cutting to credits. But man, when Elle comes out of the mindscape and then it's Billy sort of taunting her with that whole thing, like I'm electrified in that moment.
Now we
great.
can see you.
Oh man, like talk about raising the stakes to something. And then like I forget exactly who first brought it up, but we were all talking about it, like that idea of freaking like now all of these inhabitants are just toast. They're just gone. And the viscera of that is really intense. Like they've basically framed it to where, according to Billy's threats, this has all been about Elle. This has all been about like zoning in on her, undermining her, overpowering her, and then it all culminating into this like, oh my God, all of them are coming into this massive, now the mind flayer will be the size he was in the Upside Down, but in the real world, in physical space. And that's very intimidating. That's a great power up to a villain.
So the first season was all about the scientists using Elle to open the doorway, right? And this season really is all about the flayers from the other side trying to use her to get out. Really.
Yeah, and to basically take stronger root in the real world because of the remnant that was left here. And I am curious now. One that we've expressed some things, and this may be more suited for like the finale conversations, but like I am curious what season 4 will bring us, because there are a lot of things about. Again, this is probably more suited for the finale, but there's a lot of things about this season that feel closed off, that feel like they're intentionally sort of trying to wrap a bow on it, that with a couple of small exceptions, if this was all we got, I could understand, okay, this is the conclusion of the Stranger Things saga. So I am curious to see how or if they even deal with some of the fallout from some of the things that have taken place, both character-wise and just logistically among the town. So does anybody else have anything else that you wanted to mention, didn't get a chance to?
I remember the canisters of the green goo, or what do they call it? The ooze. It's like the secret
of the ooze.
Yeah, it's like Teenage Ninja Turtles 2. Secret of the ooze. They're bringing that in there.
No, absolutely.
And Erica's like, if I got to drink something, if it's between dying of thirst and drinking this, I'm drinking this.
Well, and the fact that the ooze ends up being a type of homage to the alien. With that,
I was thinking that, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Acid blood.
It gave them a way out of there through the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was really cool. That was really cool. All right. Well, I'll bring it on home. Bear with me a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, that has been another installment, their penultimate installment of this hashtag TV Guideposts run, where we've been talking about episodes 5 and 6 of Stranger Things Season 3. Join us next week, where we will not only be talking about episodes 7 and 8, but our feelings on the whole of Stranger Things Season 3, the show writ large, its themes, its joys, its critiques, just a never-ending story, if you will, of all the things about Stranger Things. So please join us next week for hashtag TV Guideposts.
Like that. I got that reference.
Did you get that reference? You like Captain America? So I got that reference.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Reed, for your tour guide Barbie.